Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Friday podcast. I know, I couldn't really come up with a better name for it, but hey, at least it's on every Friday or almost every at least. So this week's guest is Mr. PipTune
Hello.
on Twitch, yeah, and we are going
Yep.
to talk about and discuss robots. Basically all about robots. We've come up with a bunch of different topics. I decided to make this a topic for this week because, well, Pip, you like robots, right? Or is that an
I
understatement?
I would consider myself a fan of robots. Yes, that would be accurate.
So, what made you like robots? I guess that we could start with that probably.
Hmm.
What do you
I,
find? I don't know, neat about them? What made you fall into the robot? That's the wrong way to phrase it actually. What really made you decide on having a robot mascot, I guess. That would be the best way to phrase it.
yeah. So for those who don't know, Nort and I kind of ended up meeting through Twitch and all that kind of stuff. And as I was like trying to get into streaming and just kind of figuring out how to I guess brand myself, so to speak, I ultimately landed on like this little robot mascot kind of thing because other streamers tend to have mascots and stuff like that or something, some kind of logo to identify themselves. And I was like, you know what, that's cool. I want that too. So I started out with like an initial sort of design, and that's just kind of evolved over time. I guess with just robots in general, it's twofold. The first mainly being like the Mega Man series, the
Oh,
series of video games. Was a huge fan of that growing up. It's like one of my all-time favorite game franchises. Huge fan of that. So a lot of that stuff just kind of like heavily influenced me as far as that stuff went. Um, I also just like in middle school too. I had this sort of phase where I was kind of interested in like this art that was sort of spreading around of like, oh, you've got like robots that look cold and emotionless or something, but they actually do have feelings deep
oh,
down. And I kind of like my lame angsty teenage self kind of identified with that in a way. Like just sort of being in that era where kids are just being absolutely horrible to each other because of hormones and everything.
mm, oh
And
yeah, that's never good.
you,
That's never a good
you
age.
and guys like in particular aren't really allowed to express
Mm,
themselves emotionally. They're kind of expected to just kind of hold everything in, but I wasn't able to do that very well. So this idea of like, having this robotic kind of exterior but feeling a lot of things deep down was like it resonated with my teenage self. So I kind of like latched on to that image in a way. So a combination of that and just like my love of the my love of like Mega Man in general, just growing up. So that's how I kind of landed on that stuff.
that's actually interesting part that you mentioned because, let's actually go with the exact definition, well, not the Wikipedia definition of robots, but you mentioned that robots having emotions is a, I guess it's a weird thing for like a robot to have emotions, right? Like, because normally how do I phrase it? A robot and like an artificial intelligence is kind of two, not separate, but they just intervene, but they are not fully mutual to each other. When you would think of a robot, you would think of a set of device that follows a set of instructions and performs some kind of physical task, I guess. That was the closest I could get to defining what a robot is. And like, I would say that the brain of the robot would have to be either like some human controller or like an artificial intelligence in a way that provides those
Mm.
instructions. Like
Mhm.
it's like we have to. I guess we don't have to, but we should ideally kind of make sure to define what we mean by robots. Oh man, I'm
Yeah,
just
and
I'm just losing
I
my train of thought. Sorry about that. Just give me a second to reorganize myself. So,
Mhm.
I guess if we are talking about robots, it's important to exactly define what we think of when we say robots, right?
Right, right. And I think you were kind of on the right track with what you were talking about. I was actually looking up the origins of the word robot recently because it was just kind of out of curiosity. It comes from a Czech word, I believe, that actually means like it comes from the Slavic language, robota, which means
Oh,
forced labor or like servitude or something like that. So if we think of a robot as like a thing that just follows set instructions and is programmed a certain way, it's meant to serve or like get tasks done, then that could be like, our very traditional bare bones like definition of a robot. It's something that's like meant to kind it's built to kind of serve. It has a function. It's meant to do something. And this could be anything from like, sort of more contemporary kind of robots that are meant to like um, sort of act as like caretakers in a way, because there are caretaker robots out there for sure these days. Or you can think of like the earliest ones that are just kind of like this
oh yeah, the
mechanical arm, and
manufacturing
like a
lines, right? Like the
yeah.
complexity of the tasks and the robots themselves could range from very simple and just being able to perform one single task, like a robotic arm, just for example putting a car together, to something like that's fully operational and controllable. Actually, is a car a robot? Like technically, you do kind of give them a set of instructions. Like
I
I
mean, a
just
car kind of has like
Mhm.
a bunch of circuits and mechanical. It has a bunch of circuits within it, and like all these electronics that are meant to monitor certain pieces of it. So I mean, and cars are like getting a lot smarter these days with like things that they'd be able to do and like features that they're built in with. Um, so I guess in the sense of like being able to monitor themselves, and like in the sense that they have all these systems and like uh, capacitors and circuits and stuff, you could kind of consider them like well, then there's self-driving cars too, and that opens up like a whole other can of worms because they can like track their own positions in relation to positions of other cars and essentially drive themselves. Like we may end up coming to the day where we're not even going to need to drive cars anymore. Like cars are just going to be able to drive themselves.
if it's safer for everybody, then might as well do it, right? Like a
Right.
human has a certain percentage of error while driving, and the robot as well. So or an AI. So I don't know if it means that we are having less accidents, then sure, I guess we could just trust ourselves to the mighty AI. And to be fair, not so far in the future, we could actually have humans be only allowed to drive on certain tracks or like specific areas for that, which is a scary thing, but it can also be a good thing. I'm not sure. If we are talking about the future, like AI wise, basically, everyone talks about the robot revolution and like taking over the humanity. I hope that you will be on our side when that comes. But like, I honestly think it could be a potential threat eventually. I mean, it's more like an AI perspective though. Like if you give an AI a certain task to accomplish, like that's the main difference between an AI and a robot, in my opinion. That you give specific instructions to a robot. Like for example, if we consider a car, like just your traditional old car, like not even a full smart car, just a regular car. Like if you turn the wheels, that's an instruction for them to, I guess, turn the tires as well, so you can turn the
Mhm.
entire car. Like it's just a
Yeah.
mechanical way to do it. But AI is not necessarily doing something physical, I think, and it doesn't have that specific of an instruction set to accomplish stuff. For example, uh, facial recognition. You don't tell the facial recognition software to recognize this certain pattern, like for example, the person has glasses or the person has long hair or something. You just let them decide it for themselves automatically. Like, and I think that's the main difference between an AI and a robot.
When I think about like AI versus robots, they're not always mutually exclusive, but I think like one of the key things to focus on is just like the kind of build. Like what does it look like? How does it manifest? When I think robots, I think like something physical, like a Roomba you keep in your
Oh yeah,
house that's like moving about and cleaning everything.
I was gonna
Or
mention that example. Yeah,
yeah, or like the stuff that Boston Scientific has done where they like have these little robot dogs on four
oh,
legs that are walking about and are and do like certain tasks or things like that. Whereas an AI could be something more like Siri on your iPhone or Cortana on Windows, where it's just kind of like thing that um, this thing that has like it's controlled by a bunch of algorithms and like has all this information and like stuff within it that they're ultimately both doing like tasks with us, but I think of a robot as like something physical, whereas artificial intelligence could be like non-physical. That's kind
Yeah,
of the way I look at it.
yeah. If anything, I think of it as the robots can be controlled both by like a human operator or like an artificial intelligence, which is basically the brains of a robot.
Right.
So I guess it's kind of but the same thing in that aspect. Like for example, the Roomba and the robotic dog as well is probably controlled by like an artificial intelligence that has been trained to perform this particular task. Like you can also, for example, just an RC car, even if you consider that a robot, you can just operate it manually. And of course, I think
Right. I mean,
that's the main difference I could come up with, I guess.
yeah, I mean, like RC cars in particular are operated manually. You've got like your little controller and everything that you'd use to make it go left, right, forward, backwards. Versus Roombas that kind of like operate on essentially like cameras, I would say. The last time I looked into, because I looked into buying a Roomba recently and see if I was
Oh,
interested in that. It's like using cameras to map out your entire house or apartment or something. And, there are even like apps available where you can like create a physical map of it that it can, follow around and, path your way around however your house or room looks.
so if we are talking about robots, as we did mention before, like as you did look up the exact definition, it's forced labor. It doesn't really sound very very positive, but I guess human bodies are not really suited for certain tasks, especially repetitive and long tasks. So, I mean,
Right.
if we are going back to the origins of just making mechanical stuff and eventually considering them robots as well, like I'm not sure how simple the thing should be for me to be considering it to robot. Yeah, words. So I'm not sure how simple the thing should be for me to consider as a robot, but I guess it can go back very, very like long times. Like, not even sure what was the first robot that was invented. Like anything, maybe even like
Uh,
steampunk stuff you could think of, even or cogs and other stuff. I mean, the first car did come out in like what 19 something. So the robots are certainly not a very new idea that we have robots, but of course with the advance of AI, we suddenly kind of change on how we view them. Before we couldn't really imagine them as like sentient or being capable to be sentient because it was just like a mechanical I don't know device to accomplish something that a human cannot do or
mhm.
can do but either slower or couldn't really do it for that long, like production lines and so on.
Right.
I guess the just how you view robots is kind of changing, or I guess there were certain movies and such which kind of are not predicted but helped spread awareness in a way, like the Terminator movies. And I guess that view of robots is or has been changing for the past few decades.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
I was looking up early robots at some point and came across a little guy named Electro. And
Oh,
I think he was introduced around like it was like the New York it was like a New York World's Fair. That's where it was introduced. So Westinghouse Electric Company had created them in like the late 1930s, and it's just like this humanoid-looking robot, two arms, two legs, head, torso, things like that. And just the highlights included being able to speak around 700 words. It used like a little like record player within it to actually
oh,
speak.
that's clever.
Um, it could also smoke cigarettes
Oh,
apparently. So like,
okay.
smoking was a very popular
Mm,
activity back in the 1930s. So, if you're gonna make a human-like robot, you might as well, have it be able to smoke. Could also blow up balloons and have a little bit of head and arm movement as well, and had eyes that could distinguish red and green light, and essentially just like he would be able to. You could actually like do voice commands as well, so people could say like, come, stop, things like that, and he could actually move based on those voice recognition kind of things, which is we it's common. We take that for granted these days.
Yeah, it was pretty
But
ahead of its time back then, right? Like, you wouldn't
yeah.
even think of like, oh, that's actually pretty damn innovative if we are looking at it that way. Like,
Mhm.
you would pretty much consider these to be the norm only recently, right? And they could accomplish it back then as well. I just like they could actually think of recording and playing back voices to make it more, I guess. What was the purpose of it though? Like, was it just to make a human-like robotic device? Like, it, as I was listening and trying to kind of come up with what the I guess what the purpose of it was, I pretty much can only think that it was how do I phrase it this like it was more of a creative than labor if we are going back to the original definition. So people, it was it the first robot that you could consider to be a robot, as you were mentioning it? Like, if you are thinking about the robotic arms, for example, compared to that, is that the first robot that's not really specifically made for labor, but for like entertainment and just creative purposes, maybe? Oh, wait, are you? Wait, hold on a second. Is Pip frozen, guys? Wait. Is everything alright? Uh, wait. Technical difficulties, please hold. Um, Let me just message him real quick. The connection might have dropped. We might have to restart or something. I don't know. Oh yeah, his internet dropped. Give us just a tiny bit of time to fix it. So I guess, but so far we've been discussing robots. So if anyone has a question, then I guess now is the time to uh, maybe ask it, and then we can discuss it with Pip when the internet gets fixed. Yeah, he's working on it. Just give us a few minutes. We'll be fine. Yeah, I guess we can talk about the robot revolution a bit more that Kevin mentioned. So let's maybe get back on that a bit. And yeah, I guess you didn't really miss too much. We just started discussing stuff. Like we've discussed what exactly counts as a robot, what is the difference between AI and the robot, like what could you consider to be an AI and what could you consider to be a robot. We also started going into the cultural aspect a bit, but that's probably when the call dropped, so we're gonna continue on that. Just give us a tiny bit of time. It will be fine eventually. You know, things like this happen. I kind of have to just calm down a bit because I'm not. I don't feel like I'm doing super well so far. I'm just kind of branding my thoughts a bit and hurrying some stuff. But if I just get a few minutes to calm down, I'm sure it will be fine. Yeah, to be fair, I didn't really have an exact script or like haven't really uh, worked out thoughts so well. I have a bunch of bullet points I want to talk about, but anything specific is basically I'm winging it. So yeah, I just need to collect my thoughts a bit and let's see if people can join back the call. Oh, that was a horrible word order. Oh god. Yeah, I'm man. My English is not very top notch today, is it? What is it better anyway? Let's see if we can restore the call now. And as I was saying, if anything comes to mind, if you heard the word robots, then feel free to ask about it. We can discuss it as well. He's just restarting some stuff. Give us just a tiny bit more time. So anyway, that was in a nutshell. That was what we discussed so far. But of course, I'm sure we're gonna kind of mention this stuff again when we talk about other stuff, just because it's related. The entire topic is related because it's about robots, but yeah, I'm sure we can discuss the AI versus robot discussion a few more times. Oh yeah, in the meanwhile, as I was saying, as we are waiting for the call to be restored, if anyone really has a question or any topic that they want us to discuss during this podcast, then go for it. If not, that's completely fine as well. Okay, let me just. Oh, did something change? Beep. Oh, is he back in the call yet? Something is changing at least, so that's good news, I guess. His internet didn't completely drop, I guess. Huh. Hey, missing no. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, just having some technical difficulties. The internet on his side dropped, so yeah, we will be having a small break, I guess. But he's working on joining back. So yeah. Oh, should I should I put like an elevator music or something during this, or I guess that is copyrighted now, so I'm not sure if I should be doing that. Like normally, I didn't really consider having a background music for the podcast, but I might have to consider it eventually, right? So yeah, basically the topic is robots. Oh hey, Pip,
Hello?
he's back. Well, the
Am I
audio is at least.
have I returned?
I, I think you did.
Okay. Very sorry about that. My internet just decided to completely go down,
Oh,
which it almost never does that.
did your fellow robots over hear that you will be taking the human side and they decided to cut the information?
It's a very, very real possibility. I would not doubt that.
Maybe the robot revolution
Okay,
has already
yeah, I got
begun.
my camera stuff
Yeah.
back up. I just need to get your chat back up so I can look at that. Pop out.
So in the
Uh,
meantime, where were we? I kind of had to
we were
summarize.
talking about
Oh,
humanoid robots
mhm.
specifically, like ones that are meant to look human versus like the industrial ones that are
Oh,
just kind of like an arm or something like that.
hold on, your voice is a bit too loud, so I'm gonna lower it to 100% maybe. Like
Okay.
I'm not sure what happened, but it's louder than before, so I think it should be fine
Oh,
now.
okay.
So
Okay
humanoid
then.
robots, right?
Yes.
So I'm quite honestly not sure why humanity. I guess we are trying to imitate nature everywhere we can, because every single technology is basically like medicine and so on, and robots are no exception to that. Kind of follows what nature already did come up with like over millions of years, evolution and stuff. So I guess the human body is optimal for some certain tasks, and that could be one thing on why humans decided to create humanoid robots and like even animal like robots. But
Ye-
is that really optimal though? Like humans and animals are suited to perform certain tasks, and we aren't we making robots to do what we cannot ourselves? Or like, are we just making them human-like to, I guess, perceive them more friendly, like from the human side, of course, like to make them more accepted? Or why do we
Yeah,
need people? Yeah.
I think it's more of a charm kind of thing because like, we tend to trust and like people who are going to ultimately look like us. I feel like I think that's kind of like instinctual between humans who are very like social creatures. So I think creating like, two arms, two legs, stands upright, is human like, is is going to look more charming, I guess, and trustworthy, more likable compared to something that looks like completely different. So I think it's a matter of like kind of fulfilling those like not just the physical needs of needing to get tasks done, but also in a way like the I guess social and emotional needs that we have. So maybe it's kind of like trying to incorporate those kinds of things as well.
Yeah, I guess the more humanoid looking robots are employed, I guess you can call it employed, but they are employed to kind of interact with humans.
Hmm.
I can't really think of an example right now, but like the more natural robotic, like for example, robotic arm or like a Roomba is of course not really very human-like, but they are not really suited or not really designed to interact with the human on like a conversational level. While every single like if you think about like Google Assistant and Cortana and Siri and everything, which is kind of more like an AI, but they do have humanoid mascots and shapes to make them more friendly looking, I guess, and more make it more for people to more likely to accept them, I guess, and to I guess make a for people to perceive them better as their conversational partners and more human-like. So that's probably a good reason for their appearance. But like every single movie features humanoid robots as well. For example, the Terminators and like every single mecha, like the Transformer. And that's actually funny because the Transformers were cars into robots, right? And we just discussed how
Hmm.
cars are technically robots. So did they ever change then the robot status that they had? Like, aren't they just different robots then?
I don't really know because like the Transformers series I never really got into, but I know with a couple friends we were talking about the Dinobots
Oh,
specifically. So you'd have like, you'd have Optimus Prime who could transform into like from a truck into like a human shape. But then you have the Dinobots where, they have the transformer shape just like all the other ones, like Optimus, but instead of transforming into like cars and vehicles, they could just transform into dinosaurs.
oh, that's I. Well, to be fair, that's a movie, so of course they have to go for the visual appeal, like just to I guess for the human mind to identify a thing, because if it's just a random looking, of course, optimal in the design and perfectly suited for the task, but if it's not really human recognizable, then I guess people are more cold to it. They they are more hesitant to, I guess, trust it as you were saying.
Hmm.
And that's probably why most of the movies do feature humanoid, both aliens and robots as well because
Hmm.
people do wanna still identify with them to a certain degree, like all the Gundam movies and so on. Every single like even the Evangelion series, right? I'm not sure if you are familiar with it, but they all feature humanoid uh, robot vehicles to fight in. So fight like to I guess to pilot for humans. That could be the
Hmm.
best way to describe it, but they all look humanoid, so that's probably for the visual appeal and like if you look at the I guess the military devices, tanks, warships and planes and so on, they are not really humanoid. So I guess there's a disparity between reality and like fantasy and science fiction, if you put it like that. Yeah, but would would a humanoid shape be actually optimal for fighting? I don't think so. Otherwise, the military and the other like industries would make them humanoid as well. Yeah, I'm
Yeah, I don't know because I think like a series like Gundam kind of set off this like it sort of started its own genre of like this whole mecha genre of creating this thing where like people can pilot all of these suits and stuff, and they can be even more powerful than they would normally be, or you just have kind of that human shape that you had mentioned where it's more identifiable, and like I imagine that animators and people that are creating the show can do a lot more with like the action and fighting scenes and everything that they wouldn't be able to do if these robots were shaped as anything except for that traditional human shape, because artists have been looking at human anatomy for years and years, and they know how to like move and draw and animate certain things within that just standard two arms, two legs, bipedal figure, as opposed to something completely different. So I imagine that's another part of it.
Yeah, I guess again the audience and the animators as well can recognize certain moves, maybe incorporate some martial art or stuff for them to fight in, or I guess if you are talking about like the space fights, just regular or good old guns and rocket launchers and so on. I'm not sure how those work in space, but hey, that was the that was the older ages. Okay, maybe lasers for the more advanced and recent ones, but yeah, the hmm, again the robots are designed to do stuff that humans cannot, and if humans are not really optimally shaped for fighting, then I guess we shouldn't really make the fighting robots human shaped. Although again, every uh, robots are, I guess they are made for a certain purpose, as I was saying, and of course they can be either piloted by a human or an AI. But is there actually? I could imagine like a multifunctional robot, like that one that's not simply made for a single purpose, but rather than a certain or even most of the tasks that you can even come up with. What would be the optimal shape of that robot be? I guess it would be just able to transform, right?
Yeah, I guess it would depend on like the task that you need to get done. So if you need something that like has to do multiple things or has different several kinds of tasks that it needs to do, then I guess it just needs to be suited for all of them, or just find a way to morph itself, like the transformers that we discussed, to do several things at once.
I mean, I guess I did see a bunch of humanoid robots have different equipment, arms for certain tasks, but wouldn't like an optimal robot in real life look more like a Swiss knife than a humanoid shape, maybe?
Now I'm just trying to imagine like a walking Swiss Army knife with just like arms and legs that could just like
Just a
well, I guess the closest thing to that would be like Inspector Gadget. Are you familiar with Inspector Gadget?
I don't think I'm familiar with it, so
It was an old like Japanese animation that ended up making its way to the West eventually. And it's basically this like it's kind of like RoboCop in the sense that you have like a police officer who suffers this like accident or something, and then he's essentially like made into a machine, like brought back as a machine, and can like he can take off his arm or something and like pull out a tool, in place of it, or just do different like is packed in with like all these gadgets and gizmos and
mhm.
everything to
Oh, that's why it's called gadgets,
traverse
yeah.
like traverse tricky territory, or to like save cats from trees or whatever. So kind of like this like mechanical half human half machine kind of thing. So I guess that would be the closest thing to like having this multi-purpose robot that you'd have.
And actually, another good thing that you mentioned, and I just realized I wanted to talk about that as well, is that kind of being remade as a robot or like being augmented by a set of robotic tools. Like,
Bionic in a
yeah,
way.
basically cyborgs, yeah. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, that's not sure because it eventually is gonna be the future, right? If humanity wants to be kind of relevant compared to AI, like whenever the robot revolution eventually comes. Although to be
Mhm.
fair, if you have cyborgs versus just full AIs, I'm pretty sure the full AIs can win because being a cyborg is a physical and biological limitation. But let's just assume that there will be no hostility. How would living as a cyborg would look like? Like effectively, you are a robot then. Like you are a fully fledged robot if you are a cyborg. Like you have
Yeah, I mean, you've got people these days who like medical prostheses are absolutely a thing. And like it would just be, the oldest ones would just be like, you'd have like a little, hook arm or something like that that you could use. And like there'd be like little muscles within your hand or something. The muscles that you used to have that would control like your fingers and stuff that would just kind of end up controlling the pieces of like that prosthetic arm that you have or that prosthetic hand. Now it's coming to the age where you just don't even need like muscles. Like you can just actually control those like prosthetics with your brain. Like you can just think something and have something move, which is just absolutely insane that we're getting to that point
Well,
where we can just use brains to like do all that stuff.
how about a step further? How about automatic organs and like mechanical organs? What's what's the limitation even? What can the future hold there? Like I feel like
Yeah.
in the end we will end up being a brain in a jar just controlling a robot, right? Because I don't think you can fully replace or make the brain artificial without a person losing their personality or like the continuity of existence maybe.
Mhm.
So I guess that would be, or I guess somebody looking back 30 years from now on this podcast would certainly, I guess not 30, but enough time given, they would be looking back at this podcast as oh my god, he didn't even know the brain could be replaced. So I don't think I can fully confidently state that the brain cannot be replaced. I guess it will be the very last organ to be made robotic. But yeah, just think
Mm.
about I guess less limitation, not more, but you could, even if you get injured, you could just get spare parts and replace yourself. For example, if your arm gets ripped off, you can just replace it with another robotic arm. And well, now today's humans can't really regrow a limb, but that's
Yeah.
probably why. And again, this is the aspect that we've been talking about, like a robot being better at and better suited at a certain task, like having an arm is, of course, humans are very suited to be having limbs and arms and stuff, but they can't really regrow them once they lose it. So there is always
Mhm.
room for improvement, and that's probably like every single part of the human body can be improved by making it mechanical if it's advanced enough, of course.
Mhm.
So if you're yeah, if any of your inner organs fail, you can just replace them. Or I guess if you make yourself fully robotic, do you even need to like consume food, or can some organs be made irrelevant and just that's a spooky thing to think about actually. Like you could just not have a liver or like a lung or something, and you could still operate just fine. Like just bring the chemicals to the brain. Oh, that's a
Yeah,
spooky
I
future.
mean, with like I guess it depends on like energy sources, I guess. Like, you know, robots have to be powered by like something, whether it's electricity or I don't know, oil or what have you. I mean,
Or even just physical, like
as
you know, physical force, just the very basic robots where you could just operate robotic, or I'm not sure, like levers and cogs and stuff. Think of something that basic, even that. So that could be a resource as well.
yeah, like you got to put in energy into something to make it work.
Yeah, although to be fair, I think we have plenty of renewable energy. Like you could just install solar panels on on your robotic body, and you could just store it in a battery or something. Although to be fair, actually that's a very spooky thing to think about. If your robotic body runs out of energy and you're just sitting there frozen, like the brain in the jar, just slowly not receiving enough chemicals and supplies to stay. Oh god, that's oh, I don't ever want to be in that situation. Although to be fair,
Yeah.
the human body can experience variety of existential dread like that as well. So not like it's more bad than it is now, but yeah, that's a very very lonely and scary experience there.
I mean, I'd like to be powered by solar or wind or something so that I wouldn't have to like rely on sleep. I think that would be
Oh,
pretty
that
cool.
too. That's kind. I guess somebody did mention in the chat that you can make a synthetic brain as well for your consciousness, but then the question is, what is consciousness? And
Yeah,
we
I I took a class in college called Philosophy of Mind, and it was like it was a really cool course that we took that talked about like the nature of consciousness and like essentially trying to address what is it, you know. And like artificial intelligence was like a big topic that we had. It was like a whole section of the class that we had talked about. And we talked about like thought experiments like the Chinese room, you know, the Turing test,
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff to think about like what makes intelligence intelligent and everything like that. Um, like can we can't look at a human brain these days and kind of pinpoint what consciousness is or figure out where it is or you know where those emotions are. So it's like how do you end up making like some kind of synthetic brain or like a brain equivalent? When do we get to that point where the singularity that they call it, where artificial intelligence becomes aware of
Mhm.
itself?
I mean, let me just ask the very obvious questions. Are humans just very advanced computers? Because honestly, I can't think of a single thing that would differentiate us from a very advanced, scientifically advanced, of course, robotic brain, right? Like you could replicate our organs, everything. What is consciousness then? That's probably one of the great mysteries of life. But I mean, if
Right.
we figure it out, we can just upload ourselves and just materialize robotic bodies wherever we want to. But that's a very like utopian future, right? I don't think we are there just
Mhm.
yet.
Yeah.
That would be a way to immortalize oneself, though.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the scariness behind like this singularity and like robots becoming self-aware and artificial intelligence becoming self-aware. Because when you get to that point, it's just like, okay, what's going to be the difference between us then? What's going to make us unique and um, what's going to make us like distinct and you know worth keeping around in that sense? And that's kind of like the whole premise of the Terminator films, right? Is that the Skynet, you know, the big artificial intelligence is essentially taking over humanity and just kind of enslaving them. And you know,
Eff-
you have all this like time travel stuff to try and prevent all of it
oh,
from happening.
yeah, effectively, it's automating yourself out of a job except it's your existence.
Mhm.
Like that kind of far-fetched, upscaled way. Yeah, I did.
Right.
Actually, recently I did watch an anime about like AI and humanity as well. I'm I'm pretty sure it's a recent one, so you may not know it yet, but it's Vivi Fluorite song. Basically about a single robot receiving information 100 years from the future that she has to stop a robotic revolution, and it does
Mm.
kind of uh, blur the boundaries like between humans and AI as well, like the consciousness. I'm not even sure how to explain it exactly, but it does bring up some questions about AI consciousness as well.
Right.
But I mean, if we become cyborgs, like what makes us different from something that? Yeah, how do you just implant consciousness to a synthetic brain? I'm not sure. Like if anything, I think the consciousness is basically continuity. So like just me and you existing there is continuous. So if, for example, I don't know, my body just disintegrated in the near future, and then somehow I got put together a few years after that, would it still be me? Like, is that's the teleporter thought experiment, I guess. I'm not exactly sure about the name, but I did read about a thought experiment where you essentially teleport by destroying the body in one place and materializing it in another, other, like reconstructing it. Is that really you though? Like
Hmm.
that's probably the
I want to say
question.
that's like the Mudman thought experiment. We learned about it in that class, actually. The Swamp Man, actually. Knowing one's own mind. Um,
Let me look it up exactly because I
so
don't.
it,
Oh,
the specific section of it was like, suppose lightning strikes a dead tree in a swamp. I am standing nearby. My body is reduced to its elements, well, entirely by coincidence, and out of different molecules. The tree is turned into my physical replica. My replica, the swamp man, moves exactly as I did. According to its nature, it departs the swamp, encounters and seems to recognize my friends, and appears to return their greetings in English. So it essentially acts like you. It moves into my house and seems to write articles on radical interpretation, which is what this philosopher did. No one can tell the difference, but there is a difference. My replica can't recognize my friends. It can't recognize anything, since it never cognized anything in the first place. It can't know my friends' names, though of course it seems to. It can't remember my house. It can't mean what I do by the word house, for example, since the sound house it makes was not learned in a context that would give it the right meaning or any meaning at all. Indeed, I don't see how my replica can be said to mean anything by the sound it makes, nor to have any thoughts. So that's the idea behind the Swamp Man experiment, and that was the thing you were talking about earlier.
No, yeah, the one I was talking about is the teletransporter thought experiment where, yeah, like if, for example, in the far future, the teleporter works the way I describe it as is, that in one place your physical body gets destroyed by lasers and then it just materializes in another place, for example, across the globe. But suddenly one day the laser wouldn't work, the distraction laser wouldn't work, and you would just stay there. I mean, I guess you would assume that it just malfunctioned and nothing happened, but then you would realize that in the other place that you meant to teleport to, your physical replica is now walking there and continuing the stuff you wanted to do. So I guess that's that brings up a bunch of questions, like both moral and physical, like possibilities. So I guess if
Hmm.
we ever become cyborgs, we have to tackle these physical, like not paradoxons, but just physical thought experiments or physical, just psych. What is the exact word? Let's just go with thought experiment, right? So
Yeah.
we don't really have to solve them, but I guess they will become more and more relevant and more scary.
Yeah, how are
So
we going to how are we going to settle those kinds of different thoughts and things and how we ascribe meaning to those different uh pieces of what we consider humanity into our heads and then you get into the question of okay, if you start having cyborgs and you start having these half human half robot folks, or you actually start getting robots that are self-aware, um assuming they don't rebel against us and slave us, then what do they have rights? Do they have the same rights that humans would? Those are
honestly,
a lot of ethical things that people would have to consider.
if you can't like distinguish them from a regular human being, then they should have the same rights. Why not? Like it's not like you can outlaw that anyway because you can just they can try and blend in probably. Like if you can't really tell which one is human and which isn't, then I, honestly that's easier to just give them the same rights.
Hmm.
Although to be fair, if like that's the issue. Like humanity, if you are looking at it that way, humanity is essentially making a creature that is more advanced than humans, which is an amazing feat, but it also might be our very last accomplishment.
Hmm.
Although yeah, I don't think we have to fear that in the near future just yet, but it's something that we have to keep in our mind eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go back a bit, I guess, to the present. Oh man, I need to talk about something that just it's on the tip of my tongue. So, oh yeah, BattleBots. It was BattleBots, I think. Oh,
Ah, sure, sure.
ah, that show. Oh my god, I used to love it when I was little. They don't really like air it there anymore, but yeah, let's go back to the robots that are controlled by human operators and not by AI just yet.
Yeah. Something a little bit less scary and something more
Yeah,
charming.
just a bit more positive.
Yeah.
Oh, so I don't really remember how it exactly went, but I guess there were two different robots that competed against each other, and there were also a bunch of like I guess operated by the staff robots that tried to stop them. And I
Yeah, well, there were BattleBot competitions out there that weren't aired on TV. It was on cable TV on my end, so not widely available, but at least my family had it.
Mhm.
Um, uh, when when I was like living with them and just growing up with them. Um, but yeah, it's just like people are just trying to build the best robot and just like either trying to like knock it out or destroy it completely, or it's just sort of a battling competition, I guess.
What was the most broken, if you can say broken, uh, part that a robot had that gave them an advantage versus a competitor? Like, what is the most like awesome and strongest thing you remember a robot have on that show?
Um, I think the ones that I can remember that ended up being really good are just like, so they're usually like, you start with like a prism shape, right? At the
Oh,
front, they've got like a little sloping sort of piece down here so that they can like ram into something and like catch it, and then it'll like go upwards a little bit. So you can like
or just
almost kind of flip it or prop it up. And then they'd have like this giant hammer on the back of it that could just like swing down. So just
ooh,
like you bring it up and just like smash it to pieces, basically.
that's
Or if that doesn't work, just use the little ramp that you have on the front of it and just run it into like, because there would often be stage hazards and things like that in the arena, like buzz saws and or just like things that you could send it careening down. And so it had different ways that you could like damage it, either through that little ramp on the front of it or just bring that hammer down.
I distinctly remember one robot with a flamethrower on. I'm not sure if that was cheating or not, but it was super effective versus certain types. But
Yeah, I
I
think it depends on like I imagine it depended on like the region that you were competing in, because I imagine there are different like leagues and stuff and different tournaments with their own rules and everything. Whereas some might have more lax rules on weaponry and arsenal than others.
I also remember Beyblade shaped robots. Those were very popular and effective as well. Like I guess you could just attach like a basso to the body and have it a living basso. Like just
Oh yeah, there have definitely been those.
I was always just awestruck by the Beyblade robots that could fully complete the course and just move the way they wanted to. I guess it was kind of unfamiliar for me when I see Beyblades. I think of the little like plastic action figure thingies and not like controlled robots that can actually go through a course without any issues.
Yeah.
I'm honestly not sure how they managed to control it that well, but I'm sure it's somewhat related to how a helicopter can be controlled, like just tilt a bit and it pulls that way. That was always surreal for me. Like you don't see normal
Yeah.
Beyblades move like that.
Yep.
Oh,
Just kind of like a little RC car, except in this case, it doesn't just move around. It's like a machine of absolute destruction.
oh, now I regret not joining the robotics club in my high school. Like we had the robotics, although it was a pretty like basic one, not like a 1v1 or like not a BattleBots level. But
Oh
I
yeah.
wish I did join with my friends. Like a lot of my close friends who I even keep in my circles nowadays. I, I have friends, what? But anyway, the little friends I do have are from that circle. Like, informatic and geek related stuff, and I honestly wish I spent more time there. That sounds like something that would be absolutely interesting. And well, I mean,
You'd Yeah, you'd think that I would be involved
mm,
in like robotic, because we have robotics clubs too, in the US, high school, but I never actually joined it. I was actually
mm.
more of just like speech team and like leadership roles and things like that, volunteering. But my understanding of like the robotics clubs and the high schools were like you have to every year has like a certain theme, and you need to like build a robot to do a certain task, and whoever does that task like the best ends up like getting first prize at the robotics competition or something.
Oh yeah, I do remember like just having a certain predefined track and objectives to complete there, and like you had to make a robot for the annual competition and see how well it performs. Yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
although I think it was similar to programming in a way. I'm just holding this bottle. I started opening it anyway, so I guess it would have probably had maybe programming as well because it is a set of instructions and you have to like put together sensors and stuff. So I also do regret not joining it from not just for the fun but for the programming experience. But hey, here I am. Oh man, I also do remember like a sumo ring that we had once in our high school that we could just, I guess, have robots compete in. That was very fun. I think I did see a video of it recently from our high school, but I don't think I can find it now. Oh man, those are the
By
days.
by sumo ring, you just have like two robots that are trying to push each other out.
Yeah, just try to. I guess they all look like just construction equipment trying to flip each other, but that was the most basic design. I don't think we did manage to build Beyblades yet, and that's kind of more
Hmm.
advanced and also more dangerous because you have that thing can cut armor, so let's not have it run around in high school.
Yeah.
Uh, man, now I wanna watch BattleBots again. This makes me miss it. Uh,
I think it made a little bit of a comeback recently.
oh, I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, I don't think
I
why I don't know why it wasn't more popular back then even.
yeah,
Because
I don't know either.
I guess most people
But
just
I couldn't tell you where it like had a comeback or like where it's airing. Like just like with everything these days, you could probably just stream it or something.
but then again the yeah, cable was probably, I guess people are moving away from cable, but cable was nice because you could just watch a certain collection that you could just flip through and see what you are interested in. But now finding those very old niche communities is more difficult unless you are looking for it like just explicitly.
Hmm.
And like even if you're just flipping through the channels and just, I don't know, you're being bored and you wanna watch something that's fun, then you can find a lot of stuff on the cable TV, but you can't really just browse these kind of streams, so maybe that's why it kind of fell out of popularity.
Maybe.
Mm. So let's just go back a bit to the cultural aspect and like the movies featuring robots or like AI. I remember we watched Robocop a few months ago with you and the rest of the
Oh
crew
yeah,
that we
yeah.
had.
Hmm.
Honestly, that was the first time I'd seen the movie, so that was a good experience for me. And I'm glad I joined that.
Oh yeah.
But in that movie, like the isn't the guy fully dead before they implant him into the robot? Like, how does that work even? Um,
Yeah,
is it?
he was basically like on the verge of death, I thought. And then they just kind of like they bring him back to life. They're able to heal him and everything, but they decide to go with like this this secret super secret project where they're like, "Hey, let's create a cyborg human essentially and take this opportunity to take this guy who's near death and like kind of build him up brand new in a way, not just like repairing injuries and stuff, but also like putting all this mechanical stuff in and making him like a superhuman
Yeah, just
kind of, I
making him
guess.
more effective at his job as the recurring theme of this robot's topic
Yeah.
is.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But actually, now that you mentioned like and I mentioned it as well, I think I have to discuss just having artificial body parts can mess with your brain. Like for example, I when he was remade, like his memories and like desires and just emotions kind of changed and became way more static because you know the organic body receives a lot of like chemical signals and stuff from the body to the brain, but like if you have a robotic, I don't know, arm or later on more advanced stuff, then I guess your emotions and just reactions may not function the same way. Like again, we are scratching the border between being a sentient human and an AI, but like if you have a fully robotic body like the Robocop guy, then how would your chemical balance in the brain look like? Like your emotions, your memories, and so on.
It's a good question. I mean, his personality definitely changes like during the film where he's just kind of like, he's more a machine. He's on the prowl, he's on the hunt. He's got like these specific goals he needs to go after, like specific programming tasks and stuff. And like that's pretty much all that he's focused on through most of the film. Um he has like protocols that he can't break, but like in the end, in this climax, through sheer power of will, manages to defy the orders that he's being given by like the main business or the business or mogul or tech company that was kind of behind it. So manages to break through that and like kind of reclaim his humanity in a way, and end up doing the right thing and going against like the uh the orders to stand down, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if I suddenly got a body like that, would it even still be me? Like, emotions and like personality traits make a human being in a way. Of course, we do change during our lifetime, but it's a continuous change. And if you suddenly just put somebody into a robotic body like that, then I'm not sure. Like, would we consider the Robocop to be the same person he was in his organic body, or is it just like a recollection of his memories? Like that's probably one very significant question in the AI scene even. Like if you just implant memories into a robotic like synthetic brain, then is it really the person? I guess we are kind of going back to that discussion a bit, but from a different aspect, like the chemical balance and like the emotion and stuff now. So
Hmm.
I would love to be a cyborg, but I don't really want to go further than that just now. Well, we will see what the future holds, but yeah, just losing your own self, personality. Of course, I mean, with genetic engineering and stuff, and like futuristic therapies and stuff, you could also possibly change your negative personality traits, I guess. But that's spooky stuff. That's a very
Yeah. Like a lot of the questions that you have about like, well, if all this changes, if it becomes mechanical, is it still you? Um, it kind of depends on addressing that question of like figuring out what consciousness is and like what memory is and what emotion is. Like being able to point to something and say like, well, we can confidently say that this is consciousness, but can we point to another thing and say like compare it and say these are essentially the same thing or are they different? I guess does it ultimately matter as long as you're like kind of feeling and seeing the same sorts of things with like that teleporter or swampman experiment that you're talking about, just like what's the difference even if you don't know the meaning of it or you can't like you're not able to acknowledge it or the origin of it is different. If it looks the same and it acts the same and it feels the same, then what does it matter,
I mean,
or does it matter
for
is the
other
question.
people, I don't think it matters. It's not even noticeable. But for my own self, I of course, when I stop existing continuously, I cease existing. So that's again, I sorry for just steering so far away from the original robotic topic, but I think this is a very relevant discussion if we are talking about the future of robots and AI. Like if I just
Oh yeah,
stop
that's
existing, then even if I get remade with my memories and like, for example, let's just say that the gigantic, I don't know, Skynet like uh, collection of personalities and just consciousnesses, is that even really me if I get suddenly materialized into a robotic body? And even if it gets destroyed, I can just rematerialize somewhere else. Like unless we achieve something like that futuristic, like when your consciousness is saved in a some sort of storage system, then we can't really talk about us being the mechanical suit and body that we get reconstructed as later. Yeah, unless we get to exist continuously, I don't think it's us. That's just my opinion, though.
hmm.
And again, that's a very like uncanny thing to think about, that you can just upload yourself and never ever die. Or to be fair, the problems won't even stop there. If you are getting into that, you can expect viruses, memory corruption, data corruption, physical damage to the entire system, and so on.
Yeah.
And that gets very complicated very quickly. And
Hmm.
I don't think we wanna dive into it that deep, but yeah, that's an interesting way to fantasize as well. But let's go
Hmm.
with the cultural, like what were the I guess what were the most significant uh, I guess arts and like movies and so such which change the way humans view like robots and AI and stuff. Like for example, the Terminator movies are a very uh, unique and significant movie series that I guess this shaped the today's culture that we think about robots. I
Yeah, I
what
mean,
else was there?
well, kind of going back to this idea of like the robot rebellion, it's definitely a common thing to have. And I don't know if it's done for like just dramatic effect or something like that to create, that classic tension of like man versus machine.
Guess it's a well
Because like
known
any
element, right? Like it's easy to just adapt and have your viewer base recognize, right?
Yep, like these are the good guys, these are the bad guys kind of thing. Um Can't remember where I was going with it, but I think like you think of this idea of like the original definition of robots that we talked about. They're there to serve they're there to serve, essentially. They're there to serve us primarily.
Serve
We need a
anyone who
job.
gives them instructions, right? Not necessarily the
Yep.
entire humanity, but the instruction giver.
Right. We need a job, we need a function done, and we create this thing to fulfill that job or function. And I think that's kind of like why I think a lot of robot uprising or robot rebellion stories are kind of like a
Hmm.
huge thing because like what if we give a robot a command and they say no,
Or what if they
or
interpret it in the wrong way?
what if they get tired of following orders? So I think that's probably a huge part of why like this robot rebellion stuff is just so common and like a lot of fiction stuff that gets created.
Yeah, but can you think of one exact movie or just artwork creation that made it popular, or was it always, I guess, since the very beginning of just creating automated stuff and robots? When did it become popular? Like, is there like a, I don't know, is there a milestone where it kind of just became more accepted in a way, or
Hmm. The only thing that I can think of is probably like Isaac Asimov, who's like science
oh
fiction writer of like the 1940s, 1950s, created the book I, Robot, right? And sets up these like different laws of robotics in terms of like robotic obedience. So I think the first law is like, well, I can actually look up Asimov's three different laws, and there's like a bunch of loopholes that could be involved with it, because the first law is that a robot may not injure a human being or through an action allow a human being to come to harm. Second law being a robot must obey the orders given by human beings, except when the orders conflict with that first law to not harm them. And then the third law being a robot needs to protect its own existence as long as such protection doesn't conflict with the first law or the second law, which are basically all about humanity. So you try and create those laws to keep those robots in order and keep them in line. But then eventually they just come up with all these like loopholes, and eventually they can find ways to kind of get around them. Um,
yeah,
so I think it was
those
like mainly that, like sort of Asimov's writings within like the 1950s or somewhere around there, that can kind of create like this idea of like, well, robots are, they can just like not follow humanity's orders and can do their own thing.
Yeah, those three laws look very exploitable to me as well. Like you have to define them very carefully, and even
Right.
then, like you can find a loophole in almost any kind of rule set. So yeah, again, this is and actually, this is a not a prediction, but scary thing to think about that no matter how hard we try to work on containing a sentient AI, eventually it will break free. And well, we can just say that we don't wanna research it anymore because it's dangerous. There will be shady organizations who do it anyway. Like you can just regulate that, and whoever makes the first AI wins if there's even a winner in that scenario. So I, that's kind of a catch-22 because you have to research it, otherwise somebody else will come up with it, but you shouldn't be making that innovation.
Yeah. It's kind of like the dangers of like human innovation and human invention. Just
Mhm.
because you can make something doesn't mean you should. And so you might have like humanity creating these robots that are so advanced that they're ultimately going to lead to something terrible, like with Skynet and the Terminator. You could even go back as early as the 1800s, where you have Mary Shelley's Frankenstein,
Oh,
where, Victor Frankenstein wants to create life from death and stitch all of these organs and human body parts together to create his creation, who ultimately ends up being like this very, intelligent creature who kind of wants to do his own thing, and then things end up really getting out of hand from there.
I mean, technically,
So,
I would consider Frankenstein's creation to be a robot as well, even if it's made out of organic material. Like,
oh yeah.
it doesn't have to be metal and stuff, right? Like, I honestly think as the definition I give in during the start of the stream applies here, right? Like, it's made for a certain purpose. It's
Mhm.
well, more like an AI implanted into a robot, but that's the it did have. I think it did have a brain which functions. So I guess that's kind of a gray area, but it is controlled by something, and it is a device made for a purpose. In this case, being controlled by that brain. So
Yeah.
I by all means I think it's a robot.
Oh yeah. You could totally see Frankenstein as like, very similar to like that robot sort of creation kind of thing, where it's like you make something and now it's like self-aware and it's doing its own thing. It's a free agent. Um, and that kind of gets into like this idea of like, you see a lot of robots just being like made of metal and like circuits and stuff like that. But I'd absolutely love to see um, more robots that are made out of just like material that just isn't like metal.
Well,
So like you have something that's kind of wooden or something like that.
I'm gonna
Like that'd be
take a
cool.
big leap here and say, are our bodies technically robots? Like technically it obeys the command of brain, and then what is the difference between Frankenstein's creation and just the body itself, right? Like if you wanna go into definitions that much, you could say that technically the human body is a robot which you pilot from your brain. So although that's if we look at it that way, then hmm.
I mean, some philosophers have thought about the idea of just like you can like reduce the human brain just down to a bunch of like, algorithms and connections and stuff like that. You could map everything out, realistically, even complicated stuff like consciousness and emotions and stuff. So there's like branches of philosophy that have went in that direction. So it's not completely unreasonable.
But I mean, of course, there is the traditional perception of a robot being all metallic and like durable and stuff, and also created to like fulfill or carry out a duty that a regular organic being cannot or cannot do that well. So yeah, there is
Yeah.
some discontinuation or like dissing between the two definitions, like the cultural robot and the definition of the robot itself. Yeah, now
Hmm.
this is actually very confusing because if you consider like bodies and everything that is being controlled by something a robot, then yeah, where do we stop? Like all
Yeah.
animals are robots, or
Mhm.
or plants are robots even. Like wait, do actually that's a good question. If we consider animals to be robots, can we consider
Mhm.
plants to be robots? Because technically they just hmm. I mean they are just chemical reactions and a bunch of small cells, but they don't really have like a controlling, like they don't really have a brain yet. I've heard somewhere that they can kind of feel pain and stuff, but let's not get into debating that this much. But if
Mhm.
something doesn't have like a controlling mechanism which gives it instructions to like lift your arm or something like that, then hmm, yeah, I guess we could draw the line there if it's being controlled by. Although if that's very complicated because technically the brain is just a bunch of chemical reactions. That's I know that's very very spooky to think, but
That's a popular theory too.
it's just a more complicated plant, you know. It's I'm questioning my very own existence right now. So
Hmm.
yeah,
I
but
guess going back to like this idea of materials and like robots that are made of like stuff other than metal. Because I mean, like first Terminator film was like the T-800 was the main bad guy, the main Terminator, right?
hmm,
Had like this metal endoskeleton that eventually gets like stripped off, and you just see like the metal skeleton, and that's like the base of that particular robot. And it's just like before it had all this like human skin and tissue tied to it, so it can appear as if it's human, blend in with everybody else. And then you get to like Terminator 2, and you have the T-1000, which is like complete liquid metal, but it can take the shape of like basically anything. So it usually takes the shape of like a police officer that it took control over and can kind of emulate that. But it's just like it's just the appearance of it. Like you can see it and touch it and it could look human, but it's actually just like this liquid metal kind of substance. So it sort of goes past this idea of just like they're not just metal, they can like blend in and take on appearances and stuff. So
oh,
series have definitely kind of played around with that idea of like robots not just being metallic.
well, if we go to like discussing larger like Gundam like spaceships in a way, almost spaceships even, because
Mm.
technically if we are going with that definition, then any vehicle can be a robot, even a car, a bus, or like a plane. Those, I guess that most of the time they also play out in like space, outer space, like Star Wars even similar to that, like the Gundam series, and I did forget the other show that not Code Geass. Code Geass is another like mecha series, but just any mecha really, the culture of mecha.
Hmm.
Uh, where was I going with that? So yeah, hmm, so they do look humanoid usually as well in those series, but man, where was I going? I lost my train of thought again. I guess I should have watched a bunch more series of that before doing that, but
No,
mm,
it's all good. I will
I'm
say that the Terminator stuff and like how well they can easily blend in and look human was kind of making me think of like Uncanny Valley related
oh
stuff. And I know that's definitely a very cool topic. Um, the Uncanny Valley being like this idea of, you can have something that can look like a human and act like a human, move like a human, but it'll eventually hit this point where it's just kind of like unnerving, where it doesn't completely blend in. We can kind of see the fakeness a
yeah.
little bit. We can see the stiffer, like less human looking movement, and suddenly we're like unsettled as if we're, seeing a corpse or something, like a moving
Mm,
corpse.
I mean, I'm trying to think of why we feel like that. Like, is it because we are reminded of our own like mortality or like just existence in general, or is it because something feels very off? Like, I guess there are a bunch of examples even in the animal world that they try to camouflage or I guess disguise themselves as something else, and like to have that very primitive instinct triggered by just looking at a robot that looks kind of like a human. I guess that could be a reason for it as well. I'm just trying to think of why we feel like that. So I just seeing something that is trying to imitate us always just sets off a bunch of alarm bells in our brains. So
Yeah, I mean, if we kind of simplify it, if we're looking at anything that's even like remotely kind of human shaped, I guess. Well, I guess if we're looking at anything, we could identify it as human and like non-human. You could look at like a claw machine or something like that in a car factory and just think like, oh, that's clearly a robot. And you could look at me, for instance, and just be like, oh, that's clearly a person.
mhm,
Um, and then you've got the stuff that's like kind of in between, where you could have like, I don't know, something like my mascot or something, and take a look at it, just like, oh, it's got 2 hands, it's got 2 legs, but it's definitely a robot, very, metallic kind of thing. Um, and then you can look at, something that might be, human kinda shaped, but maybe the teeth and, but we take a closer look at it and, the teeth on it and the eyes or something. I just remember watching, this video of a robotic human training dummy with, actual teeth and stuff that is kind of, malfunctioning, is just kind of, jerking around and stuff. Um,
Or
and you
the
can clearly tell that it's, it's fake, essentially, where we see this level of discomfort where it's, not exactly we know and understand that it's not inanimate and not real versus something that's like a person, a real person.
Yeah, like I'm just thinking of the Tesla autopilot now, the little humanoid robot that they they recently are just everyone is just beaming that basically. But yeah, that I don't think that falls into the uncanny valley yet. The valley happens when it's really close. Like it when it is barely distinguishable, but it just something just feels off in a way. Like I'm not sure even. Yeah, that's probably the primitive instinct that gets triggered there. Like I don't think those robots that like the Tesla and just the humanoid like dummy that was used and malfunction as you were saying, I don't think they would trigger my uncanny valley reaction, but like something more like a disguising, like the sci-fi elements that usually feature those kind of stuff. Like even for
Mm.
aliens or for robots, that they would have to come that close probably, but it is definitely a real thing like that feeling and reaction from humans. I guess I would just feel similar to like there are those animal shows where a certain person gets into a dress and tries to blend in into a pack of animals and it would kind of feel similar to that. Like they know that something is wrong. Like I've seen I don't know maybe a I think I remember a funny meme where like a guy dressed as a parrot and he just visited his pet parrots and they could immediately tell that something was off. So it would just
Yeah,
feel
you could
like
just tell
that.
why is this person doing this? No one would absolutely believe this. Like this would never work, and then for whatever reason it does.
I mean, if it's good enough, then it could absolutely work.
Mhm.
Hmm. Maybe there are robots out there that perfected the art of disguise and they don't even trigger our reaction like that.
Yeah, they
Hmm.
don't because they just become too convincing now. They're already out there. They're gonna come get us.
Hey, at that point, I can do nothing. Basically, I'm just a human. Humans are flawed, and that's why we did create a bunch of robots to I guess be better at us than certain tasks. But ah, it's I'm in the anime that I mentioned earlier. Every robot had a singular task because it was super like confusing and ethically like wrong and stuff, and they decided to make it a law that every robot can only have a singular like task to fulfill by any means. And I think
Mhm.
like the real sentient, like the singularity that you mentioned, does happen when a robot is assigned with multiple tasks. Like if it just does a certain thing, then sure it can cause harm and eventually the end of the world as well. Like I did read about a like a little model experiment where you would make a robot which made a bunch of like paper clips, and the only job of it was to make paper clips at any means necessary, and it started turning entire like planets into paperclip material. So that could be a dangerous outcome, but the real danger, honestly, like the robotic takeover ish elements come when a robot is assigned multiple different like tasks to do and is
Mm.
armed correctly with it. Like that's where the artificial intelligence just starts to like absolutely optimize on like how to do each task, and I that is probably where I I would start to become very alerted and anxious about it.
Yeah, the paperclip thing kind of reminds me of the gray goo theory, where you can have all these nano machines that you're
Oh,
creating, and then they start just kind of self replicating and will eventually take over and consume everything. It's scary stuff.
Yeah, and like once it started, you can just tell it to stop because it made a bunch of replicas. And honestly, if it's like advanced enough AI wise, like it could just decide that humans are an annoyance to like its task, like they are hindrance to making paperclips, and so therefore it just decides to kill everyone with a poisonous gas or something. So we definitely have to be careful, even if we are giving AI simple like tasks and just letting them figure it out. We should be careful not to like have them break any laws, I guess. Like as Asimov attempted to do, but I guess failed at it. We have to define a set of like rules and safeguards, but as you've seen, they can be broken eventually and can be like you can use you can use certain ways to avoid those rules and still accomplish the same thing. So I'm not really optimistic about the future if we are making robots, but it's also inevitable. So hey, here we are. Let's just
Yeah.
enjoy it while we can.
Hmm.
But yeah, like making sense. Like, eventually, yeah, not even the cyborgs, as I mentioned, can stop that. So honestly, I'm just here for the ride and I wanna witness it. Like that's probably one of my big purposes in life that motivates me to just witness history, and I definitely wanna witness the AI history if we ever get to that point and just the
Yeah.
robotic takeover. I hope that they let me live long enough.
Yeah.
It's like I like you. You will be the last we destroy.
I mean, takeovers and robot rebellions definitely don't make up like the whole story on just like robots in fiction in general. Because there's some good stuff too. They can act as like the heroes, or they can act as helpers. Even if you look at just simple stuff like iconic stuff like Star Wars, where you've got we got both sides of that. You've got Clone Wars. We've got like this robot armada or robot army that is being controlled, and then you've got like those goofy little helper characters like R2D2 and C3PO and BB-8 who are speaking in well, part a couple of them are speaking just in beeps and boops or something and kind of serve as like comedy relief. So you've got those good robots too, the charming ones.
But I mean, and once you can make a robot that complex, can't you just autopilot the spaceships as well? I feel like they would do way better than a organic being could ever react. Like the human reaction time is like 0.2 seconds or something, but like as we've seen with the Tesla autopilot, it can break instantly. So there will definitely be a point where a robot is better at human tasks even. And
Yeah.
as I was saying before, like we could come up with AI that is better than humans in a certain like task. For example, playing Dota, playing chess, and any really even the signature moves of humans, I guess the signature strengths that we excel at, like the brain and logical gains and stuff. We can make robots that can be better at that task as well. So
Yeah, chess in particular is really interesting. Just given the story about Deep Blue and the development from IBM and how the human players were desperately trying to beat it and just like trying to take all their measures where even like basic human kind of things where we just start doubting ourselves. Even if we're making all the right moves and all the right decisions, then we're still kind of like going to second guess ourselves, thinking like, is the computer expecting this? Is the computer trying to trick me? And then we kind of end up psyching ourselves out. Whereas like computers aren't going to do that. They're just going to look at things and calculate probabilities and stuff and come up with like the best decision ultimately.
yeah, I remember when I studied AI for like a semester, we did like briefly mention chess as well, and I think there was like a decision tree that calculates how good each like status of the board is, and it always assumed that the other player was trying to play optimally as well, or maybe like not even, but it looked ahead of certain steps, like I don't know, 8, 10 steps ahead, and tried to simulate every single like move that could be possible and chose the best possible outcome. But even then, chess is a very very deep problem, and it has like multiple hundreds of possible moves. So we don't really have the computational uh, ability to simulate that ahead. So, but actually, yeah, chess is a deterministic game. Like there is a sure winner and a sure loser, or at least like a draw. Like
Yeah.
there is always a way to not lose at chess. We just don't know it
Mhm.
because it's so complicated.
I mean, it's a good thing that we just have robots beating us at chess and not too much else, right?
Well, you can optimize robots for anything. Like that was, I think or I guess AI had a problem with Go for a long time, but I think it eventually managed to beat a human, like a world champion human. So and also that was a that was a very fun video of a bot, like a team of 5 bots beating 5 humans in Dota. So they advanced that far, and actually, like humans.
In their
Oh,
tongue, it
oh
is
my God!
Dovahkiin.
Sorry, I don't know the subscription was. I disabled the
Okay.
beta alerts, but the regular sub alerts I didn't. Thank you, Zah, for
Zal
subbing
ezer just subscribed.
50 months. Damn. So yeah, as I was saying, so the interesting outcome of that like AI versus human in a video game was that like the AI employed never seen before tactics, and the humans actually the human professional teams actually adapted those tactics, and it was more successful that way. So like humans can't figure out everything for certain, and it may take a long time to eventually innovate certain things, but if you can use AI and robots to kind of speed up the process and like have them simulate 70 years of games in like 2 minutes, then we can optimize a lot of stuff in our life.
Yeah. I do sometimes wonder what the practical application is for creating these AIs and robots that can like master chess or master Go and all of these other games.
It kind of
Like I imagine it would have some kind of like practical purpose or extension to go beyond just like gameplay and to move into like other fields that could maybe be a little bit more optimized, like things that the algorithms and the AI could probably figure out to do better than we ever could.
I mean, I think it's partially just to show for the sake of being able to solve a problem, but I'm sure some field like medical, military, or other field will pick it up just like they did at the internet, for example. If it's good enough and useful enough, people will fund it and like just buy the algorithm straight away. I'm pretty sure that will be used to like solve not only the chess problems, but like solve. I'm not sure if we need quantum computers for that, but if we can eventually get strong enough machines and CPUs to solve those kind of problems, then yeah, we can absolutely use it for other stuff as well. If I mean, chess is complicated enough to, I guess.
Maybe the engineers and the programmers at IBM were just like bullied by chess players back in the day, like these jock chess players, and just wanted to get back at them.
Yeah, that could be the case as well.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess I can understand that mostly for now it is just for the sake of showing that we are able to do it, but I'm sure IBM and other similar companies have goals in mind, and of course money does drive that as well.
hmm
But oh well, we have like again we have to be careful about not like out not like out doing ourselves in every single aspect of being human, because then it would be kind of a sad existence for me at least. Like I often think that if I could be any life form on Earth, I would honestly try to be a human, because we are as long as we know we are the we are the dominant life form on Earth as of now, and if we make something that becomes the dominant life form, then I honestly would be very uncomfortable with that,
Hmm.
and just the status quo being questioned. Although that is probably not for us to decide. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, probably.
Probably.
Yeah. I honestly, if that moment comes, I don't think I can do anything. Like, if something is better at you, but something is better at every single thing that you can do, I don't think you can outsmart it. Like that's the main appeal of human beings in the first place, that we are smarter than other animals and we can come up with creative solutions, like using tools, using more advanced tools like cars and stuff. So we just have to be careful not to invent a more clever tool than us, although it may be too late.
Yeah, and I think I tend to see a lot of like other sort of fictional stories about robots kind of just being like, oh, this is supposed to be like robots are supposed to act as like an extension of like human ingenuity. So you've got I don't know, you got characters like Mega Man, for instance, or like even TV shows like My Life as a Teenage Robot, Jenny
Oh, that
XJ9,
one. Oh,
who are meant to like do these like or even Astro Boy, like Astro Boy being one of the earliest like ever Japanese animations. Just having these characters who are supposed to be like superheroes essentially, um, being able to do all these like amazing things and protect humanity from like these external threats, and we created them in order to like do those powerful things that we normally wouldn't be able to do. So I guess like if you talk about like robots being the good guys within fiction as opposed to like this traditional uprising or rebellion story, that's I think that's a common theme I kind of notice for a lot of those kinds of more positive spins about robotics.
yeah, I think they usually involve them being able to excel at certain, like for example, the My Life as a Teenage Robot. Jenny was really good at like solving dangerous situations and fighting crime and so on, but she was struggling with being like a human, I guess, like just doing the human-like tasks, like making friends and going to school and so on. So that was
Mhm.
probably a common element for these shows as well. Like
Well,
you have a robot that. Oh, sorry, go on.
it also makes it kind of like relatable too, because like people can struggle with that too socially. So it's
Oh,
like if you have like a robot character, they're like even more out of their element, and having someone that's kind of out of their element and looking to get within it or try to fit in, that's like a relatable struggle for a lot of people. So having that person be a robot and having it be even more difficult kind of makes like that sort of empathy and sympathy factor a lot greater and makes for a better story.
yeah. If you just see everyone as being better at something that you do, you kind of always wanna find somebody who also struggles with it and is relatable. Although to be fair, I guess social media does very very much echo that and make it way stronger. But that's again a different story.
Yeah, I guess robots can be good for kind of playing on our emotions in a way, just like, oh, they don't entirely grasp this whole emotion or sympathy stuff, but they kind of do in a way. I remember watching Wally for the first time when it came out,
Oh
like the
yeah,
Pixar film.
that was
Yeah,
iconic
and
as well.
just the first 30 minutes of that being like absolutely amazing, just kind of like this without dialogue kind of love story between like this scrappy robot, like older robot, and this sleeker looking, modern kind of robot. And just like I think that was it kind of started kicking off my like obsession with that stuff, I think, or just sort of like it it kind of advanced it in a way. So like yeah, just having that kind of like emotional sort of aspects to it, or you have like this love story can kind of like I don't know, amplify that stuff even more. It's kind of endearing to see like stuff that would normally be like cold, logic based, emotionless, or like just based on its programming kind of start acting like human. Like, oh, we can look at that and just be like, oh, that's just like us. I think is the charm of it.
Yeah, I guess Wally was a big turning point as well. I guess for the I
Mhm.
guess the most for the public at least because of course people were reading and watching other like Terminator and so on stories, but Wally was probably because it was made by Disney, I think, right? It was very very wide reaching, so
Mhm.
that also kind of normalized robots and that kind of thoughts that we are talking about right now.
Yeah.
But it,
Well, now that I think about it too, like it has like this love story, but then like the part of the section that I didn't like as much was just kind of like the everything after that was you go on the
oh the
spaceship with all
oh
like the fat humans on there, and you've got like the AI sort of controlling the direction or the mission or objective of everything. And it's just like, oh, then like the two robot the two robot main characters kind of just like get in the way of that, and they're like, no, we can't have that. We can't have the humans deciding what to do. We have to like run the show here. So it's got those two elements to it of like the ones that are kind of sided with humanity and ones that are like kind of against what they're looking for.
Wait, what was the end of it again? I think Wally's original objective was to like purify, to clean up Earth, right? And I think they did return to Earth eventually, so it wasn't
To
just
essentially repopulate the Earth and like clean it up and make it habitable again. Like the spaceship that they were kind of on was just meant to be like this temporary kind of thing, and they're
so.
ultimately trying to return home.
So in the end, he did manage to accomplish his objective, right? So
Right.
it wasn't just like acting out of free will and just messing around, but he had a serious objective in mind as well, and he probably um maybe I'm reading too much into it though, but he at least he did manage to accomplish the objective. But yeah, you did mention
Yeah.
that uh, I guess AI and robots can offer like a more relatable experience, and honestly, one certain area that is really relevant is online gaming. Honestly, like you see it all the time. You play against AI, of course, not as advanced as the like Dota Pro AI team was, but people
Hmm.
usually use AI to like whenever you can't find other players to play against, or whenever you are not really confident in your skills yet, the AI is
Hmm.
always there, willing to. I'm not sure if I should be using the willing to be a partner phrase because technically it's an AI, but yeah, that the stuff that you said about just being relatable and the AI also struggling with certain stuff reminded me
Hmm.
of just online games and like AI enemies in general. Because after all, they are just hard coded and they follow some set of instructions, maybe some conditions and so on. Even if it's not physical, would I would I consider them as a robot? Probably, it's more like an AI, I guess, because if you look at it that way, technically it's a physical difference because the pixels on your screen and like the data in your CPU changes. But I honestly think, going back to the original definition, some significant or more significant physical change, I guess, from the device or some significant physical activity. I guess defining it more like as doing something that a human or the original way of doing it was not that effective or not as sustainable is probably a
Hmm.
better way to phrase it other than just simply physical activity.
Right.
Although they can provide entertainment even better sometimes than some humans can. So that's also doing it better than organic existences can provide. So
Hmm. Yeah.
mm, that's very very blurry again. The difference between like the virtual robots and physical robots. I guess that could be a good way to phrase it, right? Like there are
Yeah, it could
definitely
be.
virtual robots.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
just think back to like because like going back to Wally a little bit, like the original villain was mainly a tribute to like HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey, who kind of
Oh,
like is the ship artificial intelligence, and eventually the main character has to like start pulling all these wires and disconnecting him, and he just kind of like dies out. Like he's just kind of like all part of this like just interconnected pieces of like the entire ship, but is represented by like this ominous red light, kind of like a camera in a way. And yeah, sort of like has that physical piece to it, but also just like the intelligence itself is it's hard to pin down like physically other than just like that singular sort of like eyeball thing that it kind of has within the ship.
I mean, poor thing. He was only doing his own task, and to be fair, if as long as you have at least two robots having two tasks, they can conflict with each other. So it's very difficult to say who is the good guy and who is the bad guy, right?
Right.
This is basically the morality of having somebody just executing actions that the creator or the controller imposed on them. So just as long as there are two humans, they will probably have a conflict over something. As long as there are two robots, and there are definitely more than two robots right now in the world,
Yes.
they can like get into that's not a conflict, but rather just a incompatibility with the tasks because one of them will hinder the other task. So I guess conflict is unavoidable even if you are using robots instead of just human controllers. So it's not really a solution to like being more peaceful. The only way, honestly, it could like having robots could make humans more peaceful is similar to like the atomic bomb, where nobody dares to attack each other because it's so powerful enough that it would probably destroy the entire like habitable area and not just the enemy. Like if you program a robot to destroy a certain thing, they can be reprogrammed, right? Actually, that's probably one other topic we could like discuss a bit towards another stream, like hijacking or modifying robots. That I know that's kind of a very very uncanny topic as well, but like just as
You can go a lot of directions with that.
yeah, I did read about some hackers being able to hijack like self-driving cars and stuff, although they were kind of primitive self-driving cars, but like sometimes when you create a device to do something, other people can interfere with it, right? Like just having it being taken over. I honestly, if I was in a cyber suit, like I I would have to be very very careful, or I guess I would be in constant danger of it just being hijacked and it just crushing my physical body. So I'm not sure how much I can trust. I guess you don't. It's not about trusting the robot itself as most people would like say or articulate, but rather trust the defenses of it that it can be modified from an outside source, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm not scared of the robot itself. I'm scared of the task that it is accomplishing and ignoring my safety, and I'm scared if it can be modified. That's probably the two most scary things about AI. Like it just not taking humans into consideration, or some malicious human trying to actually take it over and you know make other people go poof or just not
We're
be a
going
problem
to
anymore.
we're going to take this and just kind of use it for our own purposes.
Yeah, I mean you can just rest easy. It's not like a utopia or anything. If you have robots or AI take care of everything as long as there are certain groups trying, or even AI competing with each other. Like you could just have multiple breeds of AI just fight each other. Although, to be fair, I think the first group to reach singularity is going to be the only group who reaches singularity because it can just root out all the other AI in development, right?
Hmm.
Like if it's that self-aware and that powerful enough, then it can basically become the dominant robot form. Yeah, I honestly, like, this is why of course I'm not scared of my headphone because it can just crush my head, but eventually we will have like clever helmets or something like that probably. Oh man, that can mess with our senses and stuff. Like I'm not sure how well you know that those like not deep dive devices, like it's a step further from VR. I guess there were some certain enemies which featured which featured that aspect that you can just connect your senses as well to a device, and like not just your sight as a VR glass, like the VR headset for example, but also your smell, touch, and everything else. And that point you can almost manipulate an entire human being if you want to. That's very very like that's a security risk, I think, definitely.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if I wanna put one on, but oh well, as technology usually is, it will become a norm eventually, so I will have to do it just like how everyone else uses it.
Yeah, I mean, with like the Internet of Things being so popular these days, and like everything needs to be hooked up to the internet or something, or controlled via some kind of app, then it puts a lot of stuff out there in the open that people could just kind of like control like fairly easily. And so without those like safeguards and measure, like things could just be, you know, things get kind of easier to hijack in that sense.
Yeah, like
And
even your
everything's like cloud
smartphone,
connected.
even the smartphones nowadays, that most of them can listen to conversations. Like I bet some weird algorithm is analyzing this very conversation right now, but so the
Using that information to try and like plug products and
uh,
advertisements into our face or something.
for now, yes, that is their goal because companies want to make money, so advertisements, yay. But I I sometimes I don't really want to remind myself that there are tools in our pockets capable of doing that already, like just analyzing each and every one of our moves. And if somebody can hijack it sufficiently enough, like for now it could just mean like stealing our data and using it for their own advertisement or something. But like tracking people and I don't really want to get into politics, but yeah, just tracking and enforcing certain beliefs on human beings. If like you can just stay out of the loop. Like for example, I can not buy a smart TV, but I cannot really exist without a smartphone. I'm trying to actually make it a point in my life not to use these things that feature AI and like potentially can listen to some of my stuff, but eventually I have to give in because there won't be software updates for older Windows. Like you would have to put up with Cortana and Siri and so on. All the mobile phones will feature, like every single brand will feature some sort of AI that helps you. Other people have clever TVs as well, so or smart TVs, so it's not like you can just escape it completely. It feels like fighting a losing battle over here.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the reason that I don't use stuff like, Amazon Echo
Mm.
with like Alexa and stuff, or like the Google Home that just kind of like can sit on the counter and you can talk and like interact with it to get the weather forecast or pull up recipes or things like that, just because it's like always listening and it's just like it can gather info anytime to try and like, help me further if I wanted the help, but
But
sometimes you don't want the help.
it's convenient, but it also keeps me out very much. And of course, the as long as it's helpful to the human, they won't throw it away. So the companies can just harvest more data, I guess. So it's useful for both of them. That's uh, honestly, this modern digital world feels very scary. Like it feels utopian both in a negative and a positive way because there are
Mhm.
more like opportunities than ever before, but it also gives opportunity to malicious actors way more than before. Like if you just wanna put up a simple like example, even cyberbullying, for example, like you couldn't really cyberbully somebody 50 years ago, but you can absolutely experience it now. So that also brings up a bunch of questions about human evolution, like the biological evolution, like how quickly can humans adapt to the ever changing technology, right? It just feels like we are getting left behind, right? Like we have our human biological limits, and unless we become cyborg, which is again the next step probably, we can't just keep up with it. The humans, like humans for centuries and decades were not really experiencing changing environment that much, and then now suddenly over the past decade, it just went absolutely boom. Like the change is insane, and it just accelerating even slightly every single second. So where is the human limit to keeping up with technology? Even
Yeah, I
like
don't know.
like just the task that a human being is expected to perform, like office work and stuff, and learning everything, just being up to date with the state of the art technologies, at least with something, so you can be skilled at something. I'm not sure if it's psychologically healthy for human beings to be. I'm not even overworked, but just experience that much of a change. Like we are just not suited for this, and like we are we, we are experiencing it with social media, for example. If we want to talk about the elephant in the room, then yeah, like the human mentality. That's probably why every or not every, but a lot of people nowadays is feeling depression and just feeling as if they are not worthy enough. Is that because social media is a thing, right? Like we fail to adapt to something that we created by our own selves, right? Like everyone is just posting their most positive experiences and like all these nice pictures, and you just feel that, oh my god, my life is not like that all of the time, so I must be doing something wrong, right? Just kind of erased mediocrity and like kind of villainized it. Like people don't want to be mediocre anymore, and yeah, that's I guess that's kind of straying a bit from the robot discussion, but that
Yeah, I'd say
AI
so.
is also involved there, right? Like the algorithm tries to feed you stuff that kind of manipulates you, your emotions and your preferences as well. Like you think of what you see and you can think of what you haven't seen, like the advertisements, products, and so on. It just kind of
Yeah.
puts the thoughts into your mind.
The bots are like tracking every single click that you have, like where exactly you're going and what you're interacting with, and it's ultimately going to use that to cater a particular experience or appearance on that site,
Yeah, like
and
the heat map
determine
for a
what to
site,
shove in your
right?
face. Yeah.
I mean, it's useful for web developers, and I kind of studied web development as well, although just very basic. So, but I can still see why it would be a good thing to have that information. But again, just having information doesn't justify like breaking boundaries and stuff. I mean, just because it can be used for a good thing, like be that good thing preventing cheating on an exam or just making more money for the company, it can be also used for bad things. So that's why I'm very unhappy with how technology advances, but it's not like I can stop it single-handedly or not I can just stop using it because everyone else is using it and it's not even social pressure, but just the way of life in general changes a lot. But like where does the future lead if humans are already having like psychological issues that we haven't really had a century ago because of our new way of life? I don't think we can adapt that quickly. So maybe robots would be the better suited life form after all, right?
Yeah, potentially.
I mean,
Or just like the need to becoming part mechanical or part machine is becoming even greater now.
yeah, there is just no stopping on the technology train, right? Like we
Right.
have to either keep up with it, which probably involves dangerous experiments first, and you know how it is. Of course, the first few who actually make the change first, even if it's dangerous, are the most rewarded usually. Like even for example, becoming a cyborg, if the first few people will probably not be a perfect cyborg, but they will also be superior to other people at tasks. So I'm not sure if I want to be very first in the line or just like in the middle of the pack when the time comes to be a cyborg, if that comes ever. But
Yeah, the first people who get that are probably going to be very rich, if I had to guess.
oh yeah, money is
Very
involved in
wealthy,
everything.
well
Yeah,
connected.
yeah. Just the mechanical organs, for example, would probably allow some people to live way longer than the average person would. And I mean, of
Oh
course,
yeah.
it would be low behind money, right?
Mhm.
But that just creates a class divide, which eventually will be like destroyed by AI takeover anyway. But you know, we have to
Yeah.
be prepared for that, and just keep it in mind that it's a possibility, I guess.
Oh yeah.
But then again, this is going into politics very much. That I don't really want to talk about politics on stream, but you know,
That's fair.
I think everyone who agrees with me can deduce from what we've said,
Mhm.
like what we think of. All right, so I don't know. I kind of ran out of topics for the robot discussion. So if you have anything you wanted to mention for the last topic, I guess now is the chance.
I don't know. That's kind of everything that's at the top of my mind.
Well, how about we just hold the discussion here? I think it was just barely over 2 hours, so we managed to get a lot of good thoughts and kind of put it into words. So I'm happy with
Yeah, I think
that.
so. But this
So
was good.
yeah, absolutely. I just had to discuss this with somebody because it was on my mind for such a long time. And
Mhm.
man, I've been having such strong thoughts about this. So yeah, better just to get it out and discuss it with other people.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, let's call it here. Everybody, thank you for watching. This was Pip, and I guess you can eventually rewatch this on YouTube. I will be exporting it 24 hours from now, but I guess we will also just keep it on Twitch like a highlighted one. So other people who didn't have the chance to just talk about this on like live stream also can rewatch it and learn from it maybe. But yeah, this has been it for me. Thank you guys, and see you next time.
See ya.